Welcome to another 5-Minute Friday. We want to do a little setup like we were drafting out of a pumpkin, more of a high-sided pumpkin that has a soft side. So if anyone's ever tried to draft out of that, you know, when you drop the draft hose in, it'll start to collapse the side of it, and you'll either get massive leakage or the whole tank will start to roll out from you. So the task was for the guys to try to come up with a way that we could set up the draft hose without putting too much pressure on the side of the tank. So there's nothing supporting those two containers other than their own weight, and we're not pulling them over. And for the most part, that hose is all the way on the bottom. So the way they went about setting it up was Tyler here took his webbing, used 2 clove hitches to tie off this section of the hose. If we didn't do that, once that started to fill with water, and you can see, well, you may not be able to see, but we've got water right about here. So we do have quite a bit of weight. The hose isn't sagging. If we didn't have that webbing there, we'd create a deep U, and that would start to pull this whole section of hose this way, pulling against our pumpkin, causing it to leak out. And so then the next task was to, and this hose here represents the very edge of the pumpkin. So we couldn't set anything up to the inside of that. So as far in as we could get, we wanted to set up a system as high as we could get it with the tools and the equipment we had on board the Type 3, so that it would dip into the pumpkin without pushing it over. So the guys used 2 tools. We experimented with different ways to set those up, both the heads up, the handles up. The tool side up worked actually pretty well even without any P-cord, but we got to wondering if the pump's running and we're not monitoring, if it starts to slip off, those tools could cut the hose, was one of the thoughts. So switched it over to the handle side. We used P-cord to lash the 2 handles together, and that's actually called lashing. And so if you guys are wondering how we did that, just look up ways to lash two handles together, 2 pieces of wood. You know, and if you're on scene and you have branches that you can use on the ground, or you can cut them, you know, make use of those so you're not using up your own tools. You know, if you have to do this multiple days, maybe you can get them out of supply, or find some other equipment you can use rather than using up your own tools. But you're stationary, you're probably not using them anyways. So we lash those together. To start off with the timber hitch, go around this way, then you go around this way, and then just tie it off. Well, you have to do this frapping in the middle. That's kind of the most important part. This frapping is what keeps this tight, or makes it tight, so that these don't spread apart. Then finish it off with a clove hitch. We threw in this section of P-cord down here just to keep the 2 ends from coming out, but if that lashing is nice and tight, these ends won't kick out. When they were just on the ground, the whole setup wasn't high enough. So we were trying to come up with ways we could get it high, so that it would dip into the tank. Thought about using foam buckets, but that made our setup too high. We had the hose packs, so we gave those a shot. But you know, the guys had some great ideas, like, hey, just cut a couple of rounds from timber you have, set them up on the rounds, which would be good too, because you could kind of sink some of these tools into them, just make it a little bit more stable. You're not using your hose packs. You know, as that's rattling, you know, there's a chance you could start to cut into your hose pack. So that's something you want to be mindful of. But yeah, that's what we did. Hopefully this helps. Let us know if you have any questions. Okay, I wanted to go over how to tie this lashing. And this is probably the best lashing you want to use to construct this A-frame, where the ends of your handle come apart and you can set something in between them. Pretty easy to tie. Around your first leg, you'll tie a clove hitch, and then just wrap your P-cord around both handles multiple times. You know, it looks like on here we have maybe 8 wraps or so. Just good enough that you have good friction on both handles. And once you get done wrapping around, take your P-cord and then begin wrapping around the center, and that's your frapping. That frapping is actually what pulls this whole thing tight, and won't allow the A-frame to open up. Finish it off on your last leg with another clove hitch, and then as you can see, that's about as far as I can move it by hand. It stops right there. Best to start, you know, with them as close as you can get together. That way it'll give you the best chance of keeping this tight and actually allowing you to create an A-frame. And in this configuration, there's no need to tie P-cord along the bottom here to keep these ends from kicking out, because again, that's as far as I can press it out. It's that lashing keeping all that in place.